Hello, Culture Matters Podcast. I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest today. Before I do that, here's a quote just for this episode. Those who love wisdom must investigate many things. Heraclitus, our guest today, is an exemplar of investigation and learning and growth and advisory and awesomeness and has been a supporter of me and Culture Matters for, God, I don't even know how long, at least 8 years, long time. But other than that, he's been helping his clients and partners and compadres and colleagues over the years in not only the financial side, but now the business side. He's a staple on the Culture Matters podcast. Shout out to episode 392. I think that was season 33. To the one and only Joe Silva with HBK. And I'm so excited to talk to you about business life, what you have going on. Thanks for coming back to the show.
I appreciate you being here, coming to visit me and in my wonderful, not my club, but club I belong to, Medford Cigar Club. Shout out to Medford Cigar Club.
Shout out to Medford Cigar Club.
Yeah. What Jay's back in town, so they'll get together face to face. It's perfect. Can't think of a better way to spend a day.
I'd like to start on that actually. When it comes to the personal touch with clients, because you're a connector, you're in not you're in the business of people as much as anything, right? How important is the personal touch, especially times like this that we're in business, the current market and everything?
Well, I'll tell you, it's interesting. I just had a meeting with a gentleman, Matt Tinney, Windows Management, WME, and we just had this conversation. And really, after COVID, or at least during COVID, the game was connect as many people as possible. It was get onto the Zooms, who can I introduce you to, intro, connect. And that was kind of the capital at that point that you started to rack up is who I could connect you with. But the reality was, how many real connections came out? I mean, at the end of the day, if we're on sales, right? Business development sales. What really transpired from that? I don't know that happened as much as people would like. Now, and I'm speaking because I'm coming from the professional services world, where a lot of it is in the relationship. I'm not selling a specific commodity. Right? It's a service. So without that face to face, it's very hard to understand and convey and really get a feel whether or not that person, the company they represent, is going to get the job done. So what you find is in today's world, it is very hard to find people. Because now you got to figure COVID's what? Good, going on 5 years old, right? Not one. You have people that are coming into the business who have literally never had to go out and do the face to face. Now, there's always been a networking you go to, the chambers, let's say. And I think for the younger people, even when I started myself, it's hard to default to getting business cards and just kind of collecting and saying, hey, how'd it go? It was great. You come back and say, it was great. I got the business cards I got. Did you really form a connection? Something really happened. And a lot of times that wasn't the case. What would end up happening is you just had those business cards and it's like a sugar high. You got the feeling of I had activity. I did things. And so the next day you had some more meetings set up. And so you went out and did the same thing over again. But what connections did you really have? So I think COVID in a way made it harder because that's the real work, right? We all know the answers. Like, look, you're in good shape. I know you were bodybuilding for a while, right? Yeah, gyms, you get it. You get this space where everyone wants a magic formula. You want the silver bullet. How can I get this done? Give me the spell, hocus pocus, to give me business, right? And the reality is, it's still the hard work. You want to go in, you want to be in shape, you got to do the work, right? You want anything, you have to still do the work. Because as much as we cloud it with things that maybe make it easier, right? AI, for example, things that can make it easier, or things that happen on the outside that supposedly make it harder to get together. We think we can avoid the work. And the real answer always comes down to that connection. It always comes down to whether or not the people you're connecting with have confidence that you're going to get the job done. I think for the most part, especially in professional services, whether it be financial services, I was in for a while, right now with accounting service I'm in, and legal, anything in the professional service space, it still comes down to an intangible. It comes down to confidence that you are going to deliver the solution. But it also comes down to the fact that most people already have had that service. when I speak to someone, you've done taxes before. You've had experience or exposure in the accounting world, whether you have currently it's internal, it's exit, whether you have an outsourced solution, or you're doing it on your own. Somehow it's being done. Accounting work, financial services, if it's your own investments, whatever. Someone is doing it. So what you're coming in is not saying, you're coming in not saying, hey, let me show you something what you do. Right? What you're saying is, let me show you a better way. And they have that confidence that you're the better way. And that connection, that human connection, is really what it boils down
What
to.
are the struggles that people often have? Have you seen patterns that
Yes.
engage in?
Yeah,
If
I
we're going
do.
to have a better way conversation, what are the struggles that our listeners probably are confronted with that then you hear the other side of the conversation?
All right, so on the delivery side, right, coming from my side, professional, trying to engage with a prospect to become a client. The struggle there is really trying to get to the finish line before it's really been set up. I've often used an analogy, and it's very appropriate right now. It's apropos in that it doesn't happen today as much. Dating, right? Now I'm old, right? I'm oldish. Let's say oldish. Where let's just take it back in time. If I was interested in a person, hey, I had to do a lot of things for that to happen. I had to go up to them. I had to say hi. I had to say, how are you? I'd have to do something, say something where they would say, okay, I think I like this person. And then I'd have to actually have a phone number. Then I'd actually have to call them. And back in my day, chances are very good I was going to get what was then the gatekeeper, which was dad. I'm Mr. So and so. You had to be at a certain level because Mr. So and so isn't going to just say, "Oh, you're giving me disrespect." Sure, you can speak to my daughter, right? There were things you needed to do in order for all of that to start even happening, and then you had to still keep working, proving your worth, proving that you were worth the time, you were worth the effort, right? Well, let's go to today's world. Today's world, you can cut out all the nuances, the body language, things of that nature. You can text the person. You can get them. And a lot of the dialogue can happen just through that, through the electronic means. So you don't get that. You don't get that connection. The fact of the matter is people are still people. It goes back to, like I said, getting in shape, right? All the years of all the exercise things you've seen that go on TV, this product and this solution, still comes back to what? Why do still people go to the gym? Why are people still struggling? Because it still works. It still takes a certain amount of time, right? If you want to eat today, people are confused. They think, well, how long does it take to get some food today? 5 minutes. Phone, go to the drive-through, right? The reality is no. 90 days. How long does it take to grow that corn, grow that wheat, right? How long does it take for that real product to actually arrive? Because people confuse that front end, the growth, with the production side, the packaging side. That's what you're really dealing with at that point. You go to a drive-through, you go to a restaurant, they're just packaging it, putting it out. They didn't grow it, and they may have, but it would have taken that amount of time. So there's still the natural process that has to happen in the same way it happens with the certain relationship. There are a lot of things that are commodity based. Like if I'm the only person selling a certain product, right, next best widget, and I'm on the front of the market, no one else has it, well, you might be able to get away with not having that relationship because the product will sell. But if you're in professional services, your product, at least when the person sitting on the other side of the table is looking at you, they're envisioning you. You're the product. They have to believe in you that you are actually going to, if you're representing that company, that they're going to get what they desire, that they're willing to exchange that cash in their hand for that value that you're trying to give to them, that you're presenting, and it has to be worth more. How are you going to satisfy the need at some point in time?
Where do things go wrong?
People try to rush the natural process. They try to engage faster than the organic system mechanism has allowed them to go. They go to the finish line. Again, using an analogy, if you're trying to date a girl, you're just like, hey, what's your name? Hi, great. You want to get married? That's not the way it works, right? There's a lot that has to happen in between. In the same way, if you say to someone, "This is great. Look, hey, my company is 45th largest CPA firm, and we're engaged in this, and we do a lot of things, and we do. We have a lot of capacity, a lot of it. However, that alone is not enough to necessarily convince someone. So, oh, okay, so because you're that, let's go ahead. Let me bring the thing that I value. One of the things I value the most about your family. Next behind it, maybe it's your business or the business that you represent. If you're a CFO, CEO, a lot of times that's who we're speaking with, right? It may not be, you might not be directly the business owner, but we speak to them as well, of course. But it could be someone who's a corporate executive. They're charged with the responsibility of that company or their role. So they're making a decision based on, hey, same thing. This thing that I am representing, that I'm in charge of, let me think about it. That's great. I'll get back to you. Which doesn't necessarily mean yes or no, but a lot of times people are nice. And they're not going to say no right away. Some people, maybe that's a good thing. But
Why?
they might say, why? Because people are nice. Why is it a good thing?
Yeah.
It's a good thing because you know where if they say no, then you can get to, that's fine. Can I ask you, why is it no? Well, it might be no because look, your price is too much. Might be I don't feel as good about you as I do my current situation. I'm not ready to move it forward right now. I'm just shopping. It could be is never good.
What are big recurring problems you're seeing right now in the market that our listeners may resonate with? And then, of course, some advice.
Well, right
Things
now,
are popping up from all of your interactions with current customers, potential.
so I'll give you right now what's happening in the accounting space. This is really happening across the board. Is the influence of private equity. There are companies coming in that are buying firms. Now, in our space, there are a ton. I could go through a bunch of names, but I won't. We are not affected by this because we have made a commitment to not. We're not looking at it. But what happens when you have that outside influence? Let's take, for instance, you're a large company, corporation, private equity comes in, and you're not a partner. You're not vested, or you're not going to see any cash transaction from that situation happen, right? You're looking at this and going, well, what does private equity do? Typically, 3 to 5 years, they're looking to sell, to do something different. What does your path look like at that? You don't know. It's an unknown. So a large firm, like I was just at, have the same thing happen again, waste a couple of years and find out the same thing? Probably not. So they start to say, well, let me go to a small firm, or frankly, they just say, you know what, let me do something completely different. So again, one of our strengths has been that conversation because there's a lot of ways to grow. Three ways I should say. Organically, through acquisition or merger.
I think you're pointing something out, though, I want to address for the listener. If those, for incentives, who's doing the labor, who's in fulfillment? Maybe those younger, not economically incentivized. So if they're checking out mentally or economically, how could that potentially affect the customer?
Well, that's exactly it. There's a lot of ways. One is that if they're still directly involved, right? They're still involved, and because I've had this for a lot of my professional connections, right? That are let's take versus bankers. Bankers are very vested in that their client has a very good accounting situation. Why is that? Bankers need good financial reporting in order to validate the loan or credit line that they want approved. Now, if you got a $50 million credit line, you're going to say, I need some stuff. I need to review financial statements. I need an audit maybe. And if they're not getting that information, they can't close that deal. So what happens is if you have less capacity because they don't have the people, or you have less vested people, or just the personnel just not interested, you have that lag, and that will directly affect the client at that point, right? The prospect on the other side that are trying to solve. So that's a key thing. And so what happens is those people start looking at other operations, other situations. So again, they look at Is this firm growing organically, which is hard to do in today's world? You're at 300,000 personnel shortage of CPAs in accountants overall, because people just aren't going into that space. And that goes for legal, that goes for financial services. There's just a divergence of younger people coming out, getting degrees and going into the space, right? So organic is tough. The other way, which is what we're seeing now, is by acquisition. I pay you a lot of money, I buy you. Whatever I say at that point is, well, that goes. The other way, and this is the way that we have grown, and other firms I'm sure that I know have, but primarily we grow by merger, meaning we just brought in an office in Long Island. That office is 70 people. It's a very large office, large independent operation, large firm. They looked at us and said, we like your culture and we like your resources. And we feel that partnering with you makes sense. And we had to feel the same exact way to bring them on. So that we did. And by virtue of that, most of that still 70 stayed. Now, if you buy someone and you say, hey, you're now, change your letterhead, you're now this. And it's going to be our way or the highway. The younger folks who, again, don't have a vested interest, you know what? I'm moving, I'm going somewhere else because it doesn't make sense to stay here. And not just younger people, and this goes way even partners, because once they get bought out, they're like, oh, you know, where are we going with this? So how the expansion is done is critically important as well. So these guys, you know, these people that are moved, they're looking at it, saying, what's your growth strategy? How are you moving forward? Because if I don't feel that if I get on your ship or we're going in the right direction, that I don't have to jump at some point because this isn't where I thought we were going, they understand that time is the commodity. They're getting it more and more. They're like, I don't want to waste my time. Because again, COVID taught us this. When I could be doing something that is more fulfilling, maybe less money, but when you start factoring in, maybe it's remote, I don't have to travel as much, maybe this, maybe that, the money, I don't want to say it's not as important, but it definitely takes, there's other things now that factor in.
Mm. What are some things that you've seen business owners do, maybe without even recognizing it, that create top-down environments?
Well, what happens is, a lot of times with business owners is how they are grown. So it is very hard for a business owner. Let me step back. When you're in business, right? And I like to use the E-Myth analogy all the time. It's really a great analogy. You're a pie maker. You make this wonderful pie. I've seen it happen with soup. Actually, I can name a restaurant that's always happened, where it's great, it's wonderful, and people want it. So you're making these pies, but then you realize I can't keep up with demand. So you start hiring people. Right? So you have people now that are actually making the pie. But now you also have a business. So you have an operational component. Who's paying the payroll? Who's turning on? Who's paying for the lights? Who's taking care of things, right? But then you still have the fact of, well, maybe we only make blueberry pies. My vision is that, you know, we should make peach pies. And there's a great market for that. This is how I view the expand. So what happens is in the business, you have three people. You have the people who are running the business, kind of production line. You have the operational component, and then you have the vision. Where are we going? What happens for a lot of businesses, they never make that split. They don't make that split because the business owner, and to their credit, what got them there is what's going to hold it back. And that is the stick to it, right? The intensity of this is my vision, I'm moving forward at all costs. So what happens is they don't split, they never separate. And so at some point they have to bring in someone else. They have to realize the things that they don't do. I don't want to say they don't do well, but maybe that's the case, but they don't do best.
If at all, where have you seen that happen where it's split too far? I'll give you a mantra, rule number 4, the Beyond Order. Sure. Doing a lecture series on the show. Notice, shout out to Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. So the rule number 4 is notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. So in that scenario is the pendulum swung too far. They've oversplit.
I will say this. I haven't seen that happen too often, mostly because I think that becomes a component of finance, right? When you split like that, you still need to bring someone in. You still need to pay somebody. So the thing about it is, reality is most of the time why they don't want to split in the first place is they have to pay somebody. You bring in someone who's a chief operating officer, chief financial officer, they need to get paid. So you think, well, I can still do that. Why am I going to give up that money? Right. So for a lot of times, I don't really see that happening that often. What I will say more often than not, though, is that they might bring in the wrong person. They bring in the wrong people, the wrong team. And when they do that, it's very hard to get rid of the person, right? To get rid of that team.
What advice do you have for those that are interested in split? Say they made that commitment to reinvest back in their business and delegate things off their plate, so they're not just the pie maker of what they have to be doing now, where versus not knowing what
Right.
to do and kind of just sitting there with their hand
I
on
will,
their crotch.
I will tell you
For the
this.
visual,
I will tell you this. What a lot of them don't do is they don't seek out the coaching, the outside advice.
Why is that valuable and not a waste of time and money and energy?
Well, if you think about it, I mean, this goes back to, I think, probably maybe a tired analogy at this point, but if you look at, Tiger Woods, you look at Michael Jordan, you look at any of these guys, Kobe Bryant, look at these guys, what do they have? They had great coaches. They had people who would take from the outside. First of all those guys had to be what in the first place? They had to be coachable, right? In the first place, they had to be willing to listen to the information, right? Understand that when that person says, let's do this differently, right? Let's deconstruct maybe everything that you have done in the past that's gotten you where you've gotten to now. Let's deconstruct everything and rebuild. You have to have faith in that. Okay, this is going to be better, because in the near term, it's always going to be uncomfortable.
So if I'm going to visualize this or draw it out, the split happens. I go from pie maker to what? What is it? If we were going to,
well, you go from the 1 to the 3.
So let's say I go from 3. What's the 3?
3 would be the visionary, the operations, and then the actual production.
Okay, so VOP, VPO.
Right.
Okay, 1 to 3. So that happens simultaneously. You're saying, like, if I put like a picture, we got the V and the O, and then above that is the C. So I'll put there's a picture there. Like, you got to have that coach. Tiger Woods, I'm Michael Jordan, because it seems like there's a void to not stagnate.
What's going to happen is that
someone's got to give me information.
That coach has to come in. That coach is going to end up coming in before this, because what you need to have is you need a lot more than just a coach to say, hey, you need someone's going to come in and say, and the coach may give you other coaches, other people to go to, because you're going to need standard operating procedures. You're going to need to know who to find. You're going to need to know what you're good at and what you're not good at, so you know who can complement you. If you've already went out and said, let me hire this other person, you've already made the gamble. How did you get that person? How did you know? So prior to making a move is when you need to have that outside opinion. Prior to
And you're saying that so that
process.
you don't end up falling into the trap you alluded to earlier, which was people end up investing in the wrong staffing, the wrong support.
Right.
Do you think that puts a bad taste in people's mouth where they give up?
Well,
right, they didn't get that right help first.
That's true. Yes. What happens
They
is
tried it. Now they're jaded. Have you seen that?
Correct. Yes, I do. I mean, it's like, they run down a path and they feel good, and then they'll say, you know what, that was a bad move. I'm never doing that again. Right. And it's not necessarily that the path was wrong, but the personnel was wrong. Right. It's an easy way. It's kind of like saying, I went on that diet and it didn't work. Well, what kind of diet? Was it the right diet for you? Was it too extreme? Was it, what about it? How did you go about it? Did you actually stick to it? Did you do anything else to help you with the diet? Did you exercise? Right? Did you do these other components? All they're saying is, I tried it. I tried dieting. It didn't work. I tried going to the gym. It didn't work. Why did you do that? I went there 7 days a week. I was there for like 5 hours a day. All I was sore. That was the worst thing ever. That's not the right way. It's not about the path. It's about the wrong way to go about it. They're not going the right. And again, without having someone from the outside saying and preparing them, like, look, I want you to start off only doing this. And you have to be, again, coaching. You have to be willing to accept that advice, that information. When you do, then you're able to move forward. But if you are just trying to force it yourself, then every option that doesn't work, it signifies the whole thing. Oh, that was bad. We're never doing that again. I brought in a partner. Yeah, that was the worst. So we're never getting a partner again. You just didn't get a partner. Maybe you didn't look at it. Maybe you didn't plan it. Maybe it was you.
I want to share. This is a form. What do you think about this thought experiment for this? V plus O is -5. V is -10, visionary. O is operating consciousness, so 5. I'm just using arbitrary numbers
Right.
there. Try to visualize what you're doing.
Right.
So so V plus O, so V is -10, O is +5. That equals -5. Versus, and I'll explain where I'm coming to that conclusion.
Okay.
It's just a visualization versus V plus C equals O. So V plus O is the visionary attempting to bring in that operational consciousness without C, which is coaching, consulting, that third party to give accountability, to give information, to give that feedback. When they do it alone, they get a -5. Why? Because the V is negative. It's a negative. It's like a lacking energy. And so just fit, and then the net. So if we take -10, which is V, plus C. Now C matches V. Why? I'm just using an arbitrary. -10 plus 10 is 0, right? The O is +5. But the O is, if we're using it as the algebra to just try to like make a point, the O is positive, but it's not as much energy as the negative, because it's negative energy that drives the business. Meaning,
Right.
I don't mean that in a negative mindset. I mean that in like, I started this thing, I took all this credit out, or like I lacked resources, I lacked, people believe in me.
Right.
My thing, it's coming from a negative energy, right? So now without C, because without the coaching, without the consulting, without somebody like you to give me an awareness, to give me information, I try to bring in that O. It's always going to be a negative outcome, because the O is less negative than the V, because the O is a different mindset. It's a different psychology. So I'm trying to use this formula to kind of visualize your thesis here. It's like,
So
if I do it in the right order, where the visionary brings in the coaching, the consulting, it's going to have a more positive outcome than if it didn't. I mean, that's an overly complicated way of trying to get.
So
But what do you think about this visual? That's how I'm visualizing.
I'm all right. So maybe I'm thinking this a little more simplistically, right? So here's the thing.
If you can see that in the video.
You have a 5-year-old that you bring to wrestling. I'm using my analogy for myself.
Okay.
He gets good at wrestling, right? When you start off early on in wrestling, usually you go to tournaments, things of that nature. It's an individual sport. Wrestling is individual sport. Right? However, as you start to grow, it becomes a team sport. Everyone has to operate. Everyone has to win. They're individual. Person who is good, let's say, wrestling, comes up and he's starting to kind of tell the other kids what to do and how to wrestle. Problem is they're not listening to him, because they're doing things individually. Right? You're trying to build this team up. It's not going to work. What do you need? Coach. You need someone from the top down who's going to give everyone advice, put everyone in their place to move it forward. And I think anytime you look at, you can use the analogy for baseball, football, any of these sports, because the bottom line is they're all team sports. Business is a team sport. There's
I
no
love this
way,
analogy you're using.
There's no way you can be in business and
But in the beginning, it's solo, because
In
there's
the
a
business.
founder is delusional.
well,
And I mean that in a respectful way.
Here's the thing. I don't believe that any founder sits there and necessarily views a business at the end and saying that 30 years from now, I'm going to be a $50 million company. And they might, and that's great. And maybe they do have that vision. The only thing about it is they're not viewing how it's going to grow along the way. They're not growing. They're thinking, you're a seed and you're going to become this vine. They're not visualizing how much you have to prune and what fertilizer you need to use and how much watering. They're just knowing, hey man, at some point I'm going to be bearing a lot of fruit, and that's great. But they're not visualizing what things you need to do along the way, right? So that's why the visionary is great, because you have that vision down the road. You know this is what it's going to be. We're going to be this. That's great. But that's the problem. How can you be a visionary and see this grand picture, but then be worrying about the smaller detail pieces? Actually continue, because some of it may be pruning what the visionaries doing themselves. Hey, Mr. Visionary, you shouldn't be out there doing this and handling it. You should be doing more of that. And the problem is, without someone from the outside telling you golf is great, stay with sports. Man, when you, and this is coming from a guy that stinks, right? High handicap. So if I hit the ball right, I'm like, man, that's because I must have done it right. Whereas if I have someone watching me on the outside and say, look, you got lucky. Yeah, you did this right, but you still aren't doing this other thing. And then I try to do the same thing again, and I hit it wrong. Oh, wait a minute, we figure out what it was. I thought I did it like this, I thought like that. Without having somebody telling you, saying, look, this was good. This time your stance was off. This time this was off. This time that was off. You don't know. You can't, there's no way you can tell. So even with golf as an independent sport, you need to have someone on the outside giving you that advice, because every time you're up, you can have a difference. And it could be just a little bit, but it's going to come with dramatically different results, potentially negative, like in the woods. So understanding that component when you're starting out, that you are the one piece, but you want to grow, you have to have someone from the outside before you start the split to help lay out the roadmap. Maybe you aren't getting the COO opinion. Maybe in the front end, it's just building out the production side. And right now, you're still, as a visionary, still going to be the chief operating officer of finance, because right now it makes more sense to do that. Or maybe you have a product that can be outsourced on its design and build. And so you don't need as much on the production side. Now you need someone helping
you bring up an interesting part. I mean, how much of founding a business isn't explicit at all? It's implicit. Nuance, a feeling, an inertia. Like, I lack, right? If it's starting, it's coming from a lack. There's a lack that's where, let's say now it becomes an organization. Oftentimes founders aren't even CEOs. Like all or whatever, however the structure is. But what do not all CEOs are founders, but every founder is a CEO. Implicit in the fact that they started it.
At least in the beginning, right?
Yeah,
at
least in the beginning.
Because the founder has the vision. So I want to do something.
In the beginning, there was the word.
Right. And so with that word, then there was the
like, I'm gonna start this thing.
Right. So that becomes, you're right. That is true, in that there is that vision, right? But it's very hard to separate at some point the vision from the logistical piece of how do I build this, right? And in today's world, if you are exposed in the profession, you get this. You understand that this is what happens. People do this. The point comes is, when do you make that move, right? And for a lot of people, they don't know. They never make the move. There's a lot of this fear involved. It's still a risk.
What would be your advice to our listeners that they're sold? I mean, on the idea of accountability coming from that external help, however that's going to be designated, advisor, consultant, coach, what have you. What questions do you recommend them asking, or how to participate in the qualifying process, so that, because it seems there's a degree of paradox. Meaning, if I can't pick my operating I've got a split now, right? Meaning, if I'm unable to interview split,
Well,
right?
So
what questions should they ask?
So it's definitely an interview process, right? So first of all,
you see what I'm saying? If I can't even hire my operating person, how am I supposed to operate? How am I supposed to hire the right company to help me with that operating person? That's a paradox.
Well, not so much, to be fair, because it's not that you can't hire for the operating person. It's just that you don't know who to hire, or that you're cognizant that you don't know who the best person is, right? So if I'm in,
yes, exactly.
So if I'm in, if I'm selling bikes, and I'm a whole bike shop, I want to be a big bike shop, I'm going to search then for somebody who is familiar in the bike space. Maybe it's someone who's already done what I've done. I might go try to find the guy who has started, who's now Cannondale, runs Cannondale. I might have to go to them and say, hey, look, I know you're busy. I got to pay you a lot of money because you're just not going to do this for anybody. But obviously, you built a gigantic bike company. I want to do the same thing. So maybe I need to follow your path. And that's ultimately what it comes down to is you need to seek out the person who either has coached along the same way. Like, look, if I wanted to be a great basketball player, would I, maybe I can't hire him. Maybe I try to read his books. I would go after, who coached for Michael Jordan, right? Because I'm thinking, well, who else has coached some of the best people in the world?
So is that a big piece of what your recommendation be? Where is the experience?
Yeah, that's exactly where if you are trying to go out, it's finding the coach that's specific in your space, as specific as possible. Finding the person who is going to already have seen the bumps in the road. That's why, if you ask your family, friends, whatever, they're going to give you advice based on emotion. They want to protect you. They don't want to see you hurt. So they're going to tell you things that maybe, don't take that risk, don't do that because they're trying to protect you. The problem with protection is just like, if you never let the fly.
So what questions would you recommend that our listeners ask to gauge the degree of the degree of experience and
Well,
credibility?
The one would be definitely who else would be helping the space. What other companies have you worked with? So, like for example, we work with a lot of fractional CFOs, right? They're great partners of ours because they can come in, they can do this piece, the fractional CFO part, which is another piece. Where in today's world, you can get fractional. You don't necessarily have to hire someone to be a full-time COO. You can take a step toward that. Maybe that's all you ever use. Place, you go to the fractional that we work with and say, hey, we got a situation right now with one of our companies that is an insurance company, and they're looking for help. Who do you have that's in that space? I got Jim Smith. Jim Smith, actually with a controller for an insurance company, 20 years. Okay, great. He's got a pedigree there. What's his track record? Great. Does he work well with him? Great. What's his type of demeanor? What? Great. Maybe I can put partner them now. Oh, you know what? That guy is really more of a tell you to do it guy, and we need someone who's more of a listener and a handler. Okay, now you got to match personalities. But it's about finding the person that's already basically went down that road, who knows where the potholes are. That's really the best advice you can do, best way you can go about it. Finding the person that's already there, finding the person already traveled that path, and pay them what they. COVID, use that example. COVID's unprecedented. That pothole would not have been. That was a gigantic. That would have been very hard to see coming. Right? So things are still going to come up.
What do you say to the person listening that has more so been nickel and diming their advisor?
Well, it goes back to your investment.
Try to keep it,
It goes back
PG.
to your investment. Yeah, no, it goes back to. It's the same thing. It's do you look at your people and your advisors as assets, investments, or expenses? And certain things are expenses, right? Someone that if I can get job, but if I have someone that specializes in that space, that's an investment. And I have to look at how much are they going to give me in growth? What is my growth potential, my growth outlook, based on this advice, based on this person?
Culture. Does it matter?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because over time, if you're not in alignment, what's going to be the overarching thing and the overriding, especially in today's world where you have a lot more remote activity.
But what does alignment mean? Because it sounds like we're gonna get aligned after this. So it's like we're gonna have a little bourbon. We're like, what is aligned?
Let's just sort of make it simple terms. If you are a business owner, all you care about is making money, and it doesn't matter about customer service, and I'm working for you, and I care about the people, that's clearly a misalignment, right? We're not going to get along because the things I believe are important, you're not.
So the values are in contradiction.
Correct.
Different values.
Absolutely.
How can that affect productivity?
Well, dramatically, it won't be there. I mean, it's a simple matter of over time, if you are working, you're going to work for a couple of things, right? The money is what you is what's going to keep you, is what's going to bring you in the door, but your satisfaction is what's, that money is going to become less and less important versus your satisfaction of what you do on a daily basis. It's a lot of time in your life. It's a lot of time to give in a day, in a week, in a year, month, or your lifetime to something that you are not satisfied. So if you're not aligned from the get-go, it's going to be truly affect productivity. Because guess what? You're not going to work as hard. You're just not going to be motivated. And if you're not motivated, it's, your product's going to, the productivity is going to suffer.
Listeners to take action on as soon as this ends. What is it?
Well, it depends on where you're at, right? What are you doing? So if let's say you're a business owner and maybe you're looking to expand, it would be to dig into the details, dig into what you're doing currently. Where's the money going? Where's it coming in? And figure out how you can grow. Figure out who you need to bring in and reach out to help guide you to the next step. Because if you don't have a plan for the next step, then you're just walking along the path every day, right? You need goals, and some should be massive, and others should be, this is what I intend to do today, this week, this month, this year. Right? These are the things I need to accomplish. So if you don't have your goals laid out, more and then that'll determine, because maybe finding that person is something that should happen tomorrow, but maybe it's something that should happen in a year because you aren't really even in that place to act on whatever advice is given to you by a coach. You might not be financially stable. On the near term, you may have to just cut expenses. You may be working in the negative. And you say, well, that's the first thing I need is make sure I'm profitable. That could be you get a profitable coach. You feel that's where you need to go. But the long hard look of what can you do in your own backyard is probably the first step. Now, if you're in sales, you're on the other side, you're working for someone like this, having the alignment for sure, making sure that the place you're at is the right culture, the right alignment with you. But then in turn, understanding that technology and a whole bunch of other things, but at the end of the day, it's a person saying, I want to provide you this, and another person saying, I believe you can do that. Here you go. Let's engage. That's what it comes down to. If you're not getting that skill, there is going to be a very big gap in the people who understand the relationship side of it and the commodity, and are working in the commodity side. Commodity side of it, especially with AI and things of that nature, AI has commoditized a lot of things, right? There are guys who are afraid, and gals who are afraid of what's coming because of AI. They say, take certain jobs, but then it allows for other jobs to happen. It allows for other things to happen. Who's maintaining that production? Who's in charge of building it out? Who's in charge of analyzing? Who's in charge? There's going to be other opportunities and other jobs. And what it always comes down to on the sales side of the fence, especially in professional services, is that relationship. That's always going to be key, especially at high level sales.
Joe, one place people can contact you, direct, move forward, bring you into their organization, build that relationship. What's the best way to contact you, get in touch with you, follow you?
So J Silva, JSILVA at HBKCPA.com. You could find me on LinkedIn, Joe Silva Jr., Joe Silva Jr. on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I don't necessarily post all that often, but I'm there. But yeah, I mean, email, absolutely. Reach out. Look, I love connecting. I spent 18 years as a financial planner, 6 years VP sales in an IT company. getting better. And that is always connecting with people. Right? How can I connect? So if someone says, "Oh, I do this," now my mind instantly goes, you should speak. IT companies. He's at that level, right? Does high level project work. But instantly I said, "You know so and so?" And he said, "No, I don't." I said, "You know what? You should connect with that person. Here's why." What's the reason? I love that connection. You're always valuable. You're always valuable if you can connect. If you know how to connect. Because otherwise, then you're just straight. If I'm meeting with people and all they're doing is feeding me, you get tired. You have to give, you have to feed, you have to give back. And in the business world, that's the greatest commodity, is being able to give them a people in situations that will help them to do better, either directly for themselves or the clients or the company, then you're always going to be valuable.
If you're listening to this episode, I challenge you to listen to season 33, episode 392. Very different conversation with our guest today, Joe Silva. And man, thanks for coming back. Thanks so much.
I love it, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Look forward to hopefully being on another one.
Follow Joe, and we will see you next time on the Culture Matters podcast. Please leave us a review on the Culture Matters podcast. We will see you soon. Thanks, brother.